Hi guys, my name's Dale and welcome to D&DGaming. In for review this time around is off-road driving simulator MudRunner. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dav.
Hi guys, welcome back. MudRunner is an off-road driving simulation game developed by Sabre Interactive. The game was released for Windows PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in 2017 and is a spin-off of Spin Tires, a game developed by D&DGaming and released 3 years earlier in 2014. Lead developer Pavel Zagraburny had created Spin Tires at D&DGaming but left in 2015 with some controversy surrounding his development of the game. Moving to Sabre Interactive, Zagraburny was able to bring certain licensed elements of the game with him, aiding in the development of MudRunner. MudRunner was then further released on Nintendo Switch in 2018 and both Android and iOS in 2020. So Dale, what are your first impressions?
First impressions, off-road driving simulator where you get to drive huge trucks through the wilderness. How about you?
Pretty much the same. An off-road driving simulator with insane amounts of mud. And I thought this was probably going to be a frustrating game. So what are your thoughts following the playthrough?
So I'd already played Spin Tires, so I knew roughly what to expect with this, although it was clear straight away that this is a more complete game, in my opinion. As Spin Tires mostly just felt like a tech demo. Like with this, you had that nice short tutorial to get to grips with the basics. Didn't have that at all in Spin Tires. Yeah, following the tutorial, which was short and just kind of to the point, which was nice. I then did all the challenges as the game recommends, just to expand on the basics. After that, it's just lots of back and forth across the various maps in single player, essentially just picking up logs at one location and dropping them off at another. Quite limited gameplay in many ways, but I'll come onto that later. Although it is a very basic game, it is enjoyable, and what they focused on, such as the physics, they've done really well. It is one of those kind of niche games in many ways, a bit like, for example, Euro Truck Simulator, but it does still have that mainstream appeal because of, it's just one of those satisfying games that you can just jump into, easy to get to grips with. Yeah, just enjoyable, really. What did you think?
Well, at first I found it quite frustratingly slow, but gradually began to enjoy it as I played it more. And yeah, it's one I'll pick up again when I fancy offloading some logs. As we'll come on to later, attention to detail in most parts is quite impressive in this game, especially when it comes to game environment physics.
So in terms of graphic options, did find these very basic, hardly any options at all, to be honest.
As you say, it's very basic, but in terms of graphics performance, we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but I was running on the maximum settings. It ran well on my PC with only one or two random graphic freezes, but nothing game breaking. They were very brief. Graphics generally are pretty good. It really has quite a bleak look about the game. And what I mean, it really has that feeling that you're in like the forests of Russia or somewhere like that. The game colors are kind of washed out, which gives it that kind of bleak look, and it really works well for this game. However, graphics inside the vehicle cabs are not so good, and we'll come on to that one later.
Yeah, so it ran well for me, no issues at all. I thought it was nice detail on the vehicles themselves, apart from the interiors, like you mentioned, which just seemed like an afterthought, and we'll come on to more about that later. Nice environmental graphics, I thought. It is just mostly forests and water, but they were nicely detailed. I like that the environments are almost fully destructible. You can knock down trees, fences, and most other objects that might be in your way. In terms of player controls, there's options for keyboard and mouse, controller, or a wheel. I played keyboard and mouse as usual. There is full key rebindings as well if you need that.
So this is first and third person vehicle control, so you can switch between the two. I found one useful thing when you're stuck in the mud is to select manual gearing and feather the throttle and use the gear stick in either first or reverse. I found this quite useful and could sometimes get you out of the mud without having to get another truck involved to rescue you, but just don't go into 1+ gear because it just stalls every time. So what did you think about the game structure and mechanics?
So in terms of the mechanics, it goes straight into the tutorial when you first start the game, before even coming up with any game menus, which I thought was a bit different. Your main objective for the most part is just collecting logs from the log stations, delivering them to the lumber yards, and using a variety of heavy machinery to do so. It really feels like you're driving around in Russia or Siberia, though. Tank up on some vodka before your shift and get logging. Although get ready to get stuck in the mud a lot.
It's sometimes very slow going and may not suit the impatient gamer. Overturning vehicles is a fairly common occurrence, or at least it was with my shit driving anyway.
Damn it!
The vehicle detail is really good and they look really realistic until you look around in the cab view. The cab looks good itself, but the dashboard graphic head-up display is shockingly bad. It looks like a placeholder that they forgot to replace, and it's the same in every single vehicle. You can either manually load the logs if you have the crane attachment on your vehicle, or you can just drive up to the loading point and the logs will appear automatically, provided you have the right attachments on the vehicle, such as the correct trailer size. In terms of modes, there's one single player mode and then also challenge mode, which is selectable from the main menu.
Single player mode consists of 6 maps to complete. Each map contains various locations with which you have to visit to complete challenges and numerous vehicles to unlock on the map. As mentioned already, it's largely just delivering logs to lumber yards with a few additional bonus challenges.
In terms of challenge mode, this is selected from the main menu and consists of 9 challenges to complete. Each challenge is in a different location and the tasks to complete vary from successfully reaching locations, rescuing stranded vehicles and refueling. There are also 3 bonus objectives per challenge, and these give you a maximum of 3 stars. These range from objectives such as sustaining no damage, driving using first-person cab view only, and completing the challenge at night. There is an online co-op mode, however we didn't actually test this because we felt that it's very similar to the main modes, just obviously co-op online. In terms of UI, it's quite simplistic with gears, compass, fuel gauge, damage gauge and selections for 2-wheel or 4-wheel drive, as well as diff lock and advanced settings. The advanced menu varies per vehicle. For example, if you're driving Land Rover, it's limited on advanced features, but if you're driving a log crane, then the vehicle has advanced controls for the crane to collect logs.
In terms of the game physics, these are excellent, especially for the mud, which provides a real challenge sometimes, as you have to pick the right route to avoid getting stuck. You know, there's normally several alternatives as well. The paths slowly get worse the more you drive them, so you have to consider your route and sometimes try alternatives if a particular route gets too muddy. Or at least depending on the vehicle anyway, as some of the bigger ones will pretty much go through anything. The tyre tracks stay on the map throughout the playthrough, and any trees you knock down will stay that way even if you go right across the other side of the map and then come back to that area.
As Dale's just said, the physics are really good. The mud and water have been really well implemented, and it really feels like you're driving through, well, or most of the time you spend stuck in either the mud or the water. The mud is insanely deep in the areas of the map, and the way it sticks to the tyres and splashes up the wheel arches and reacts to being driven through is awesome. The water is just the same, just really well detailed to a high level, and physics of the mud and the water and how they react to the vehicles has clearly become the main focus of the game, as you'd expect. The vehicles slide around in the mud really realistically and all handle quite differently from one another too. Collision has also been done really well, with different sized trees and rocks reacting differently. Some trees you can just mow down, others you got absolutely no chance. But there's little, if any, missed collisions, basically where you drive straight through, like you do in some games.
So in terms of the sound and music, I thought they were really realistic vehicle sound. You got different sounding engines between the vehicles, and yeah, they've all got kind of unique sounds when you got the crane attachment, for example. Okay background music in the menus and when completing tasks, although I did find it was a bit, I guess, like cheesy and doesn't really suit the game. it suddenly like blasts in at certain times and almost like catches you off guard. And although I'm metal and rock fan myself, it basically is. It kind of just, it doesn't really suit the game, I didn't think. But yeah, so it was a little bit unusual the way they've implemented the music into it. The general environmental sounds were good, you know, and the ambient sounds. There's not much, a few animal sounds, and obviously as you run over certain like logs and twigs and stuff, you get those sounds.
I thought the music was quite cool in the menus, if you like rock and metal, that is. But yeah, I agree, it does come in randomly quite loud at certain points, like when you're carrying logs to the lumber yard, when you're within a certain distance of the yard. However, other than this, there's no music while you're driving around, which I thought was a bit of a shame, as for most of the game you find yourself bouncing the vehicle off the rev limiter trying to get out of the mud. And the constant engine note at that level does get a bit much. And some music that you could switch on and off, for example, would have helped to kind of drown that noise out a bit, I guess. That brings me on to the general game sounds. They're okay, I guess, in my opinion, but most of the vehicle exhaust and engine sounds were pretty similar to one another, and I thought they could have done with a bit of difference between them. I didn't really notice much difference between the different vehicles. The sound of the squelching mud and snapping of branches as you drive around, I thought was pretty good. In terms of bugs and glitches, other than one or two very quick game freezes, kind of blink and you miss them, I didn't really come across any other bugs or glitches to speak of.
No, I didn't come across any issues at all there. So to sum up, things I liked about the game: excellent physics and handling, which really feels like you're driving, you know, the different vehicles, whether that's like the smallest Land Rover type vehicle or the biggest E-Class, like absolute monsters. Yeah, they did, you know, feel different, vastly different depending on what vehicle you're in. And that's even, you know, playing on mouse and keyboard, which is, again, this sort of game, ideally, I think for this, you know, controller at the very least, or wheel would be pretty cool. But yeah, I don't have either of those at the moment. It kind of made me want to quit my job and go off and drive big logging trucks around the wilderness in Alaska or Siberia or somewhere and just get away from it all. The challenges are fun and further introduce you to the different mechanics of the game, you know, like we touched on earlier, you know, whether that's kind of traversing through water or the steep mountains. And the water is a real challenge, actually, because you're never really quite sure how deep it is in places. I like the variety of different vehicles that are available to unlock. You know, you start with some defaults on the map. You can unlock others, you know, that are kind of randomly generated on each map. But then you can also unlock them in the menu so that when you move on to the next map, provided it meets the requirements of the map, you can then choose, you know, any vehicle that you've unlocked. The E-Class trucks are just awesome, absolute huge things. And yeah, they're just great fun to drive around just because of the sheer size and power of them. You know, you rarely have any issues getting stuck, and it's just like power if you're going through any mud or water. I thought it was good damage modeling. For example, if you're in the deep water, the engine slowly gets damaged and starts to stall before basically seizing up entirely if you go too deep. I thought the exhaust splattering was quite funny. So if you really damage a vehicle quite badly, it starts to kind of have this backfire on the exhaust, which I found quite funny for some reason. I think it's because there's not much other sound, you know, you've got no music or anything like that, and you're just driving around with this like battered truck with the exhaust spluttering and backfiring. But there's also a certain amount of exterior damage starts to show on the vehicle itself. The game's very supportive of mods, which I think is always a good thing for games generally, although this is a fine line between, you know, supporting mods and you know, the developer allowing people to expand on the game. Equally, you know, you don't want it going so far that it's almost like the developer ends up handing the game over to the community. It's like a half-finished game and hoping they expand on it with mods. And yeah, I kind of come on to this in my dislikes, but I did find a certain amount of that with this game. Feels a little bit half-finished.
Yeah, so in terms of physics, as mentioned earlier, the mud and water are like nothing else I've seen in any other off-road driving sim other than spin tyres, and it really makes the game. There's a really good variety of vehicles that look authentic and have varying sort of utilities to them. They're not all particularly similar to one another. Some of them have different trailer types and things you can connect to them. The vehicle handling is really good, even using a keyboard, which has less handling feedback than a controller or wheel. But it just felt like you could really feel the vehicle sort of getting stuck and sort of trying to power through the mud and the water. The attention to detail on the vehicle exteriors was really good.
So in terms of things I didn't like, yeah, the poor interior graphics, it just meant I only wanted to really play it in third person. Admittedly, I think even if the graphics were more detailed on the dashboard, I mostly would have played it in third person anyway, I expect, because it's just much easier to see and, you know, see around the vehicle and maneuver the vehicles generally, again, especially on the bigger vehicles. But yeah, I thought the poor interior graphics and dashboard graphics for the vehicles is just a huge oversight. It really was. I thought the route planning on the in-game map could have been better. In particular, there's a box that kind of pops up when you drop a waypoint, and that basically gets in the way of your route planning, and you can accidentally click it and then it resets the whole route. It's not particularly well implemented, the route planning side of it. Found the handling at high speed, especially in the smaller vehicles, which you can get some speed up on, especially if you're actually on paved roads. It was really twitchy as you get as the speed picks up. Albeit I was playing on keyboard, which obviously doesn't have the same feedback as a controlled or wheel for driving games. But even so, you know, I played other driving games with mouse and keyboard, and no issues really there in terms of the twitchiness. So I feel that was, you know, an issue with this in particular.
So for me, the dashboard graphic really broke immersion for me. It's poor. I mean, it's like the developers were right at the end of the game's development and were like, oh shit, we forgot the dashboard graphic. But luckily we've just taken on that new intern or T-boy. Right, Johnny, you go off and design a dashboard display. The game's about attention to detail, so check out the real vehicles online and make sure it looks authentic.
5 hours later.
Boss, I finished the dashboard graphics. What do you think?
The fuck is that, Johnny? I said attention to detail, not lack of detail. It's too late to change it now. The game releases tomorrow. We'll have to go with it and pray that nobody uses the first-person cab view mode.
Damn it!
Seriously, though, it's really bad. They would have spent so much time on the attention to detail on the vehicles' exteriors and the environment and the mud and the water, and then they just seem to fall down on such a simple thing that could have easily made the game better. So do you think there are any missed opportunities in the game?
Yeah, I feel there could have been more varied gameplay for sure, you know, with different tasks rather than basically just moving logs from point A to point B. It does get a little bit repetitive, to say the least, doing that. For example, I thought about how about having the ability to lay down like rubble or gravel to help with the grip on the really rough roads, because you're back and forth over the map. And for example, you could have like a dumper truck and a quarry, and another part of the gameplay would be to use the dumper truck, go to the quarry, pick up the rubble, and then it could form another objective. When the road's so muddy you're barely able to drive through it, you can kind of scatter it with rubble, and it just mix the gameplay up. There's so much more they could have done with it. In some ways it does just feel like a slightly expanded tech demo. There's so much potential, it just feels a little half finished. It's a real shame, because what it does well, it does really well. I definitely feel there could have been more graphic options. I did like the environments, and but the ability to just tweak the graphics, depending on how powerful your system is, could have really kind of brought it out a bit more.
Yeah, I thought punctured tyres would have been a good one to include, especially with all the tree branches and rocks around that you could have got punctures from if you hit them too hard. I know some of the vehicles in real life may have solid tyres, I guess, because of the type of vehicles they are, but some, such as the Land Rover, could have had the ability to get punctures. I think more could have been done with the manual gearing. Every driver knows when you're stuck in the mud or snow, it's second gear and lots of throttle, and it gives you more torque and therefore grip, don't they? More manual gearing other than first and reverse would have been good as well, because 1+ just stalls the engine every time if you stick it into that when you're trying to get out of the mud. I thought they could have included a mini map. The main map wasn't really good, as mentioned earlier, and having to refer to it a lot became annoying, and the compass was mostly useless. So a mini map would have really helped out there to navigate yourself around. I thought there was a lack of wildlife, other than a few birds which seemed to only move when you beat the horn. There was nothing else, which I thought was a bit rubbish, and mowing down some deer could have actually been an extra challenge. So in terms of scores, Dale, what do you think?
So I feel it's a basic but satisfying game, just with slight missed opportunities for expanded gameplay. What they focused on, such as the physics, they've done excellent, but there's a lot of missed opportunities, I feel. So for me, it's going to be a 7 out of 10. How about you?
Yeah, I thought it was a good game and fun to play in short stints, but I couldn't play it for long bursts. Unfortunately, I just feel it falls short of being a great game by a small margin for my reasons given earlier, really. So from me, it's also a 7 out of 10.
Okay, guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.